The office always felt a little colder on Monday mornings, but somehow, when she walked in, my boss, the woman who effortlessly owned the space, everything softened. It wasn't just the way she moved, like she was part of the rhythm of the building itself, but something deeper, a quiet gravity that pulled my attention without demanding it. She was in her early 40s, graceful in a way that wasn't flashy but impossible to ignore. Not just because of her sharp suits or the way her dark hair caught the light, but because of the way she carried herself, calm, assured, yet somehow approachable. The kind of woman who'd smiled at me once during a meeting, just briefly, and it sent an unexpected warmth curling in my chest. I was 24, still figuring out the tangled hierarchy of corporate life, but also trying not to get lost in the chaos. She was my boss, but more than that, she was someone I watched from the edges of my day, her voice confident and steady, her expressions unreadable except for those rare moments when something softer slipped through. Our interactions were usually short, clipped by the urgency of deadlines and the hum of keyboards, but I caught little sparks in between, like the faint scent of jasmine that followed her, subtle but lingering, or the way her eyes would meet mine for a second longer than necessary during presentations. I wondered if she noticed the way my fingers would tighten around my coffee cup whenever she was near. One afternoon, we were both waiting in the elevator. Just the two of us, the hum of the machinery filling the silence. I felt the warmth radiating off her as the elevator doors closed. Our shoulders brushed briefly, and I was suddenly hyper-aware of the smoothness of her skin beneath the light fabric of her blouse. She glanced at me with a knowing smirk, as if she sensed the sudden pulse of my nerves. It wasn't just attraction, it was the way she seemed to command not only the office but also the space between us. There was a tension I couldn't quite name, an electric current humming beneath the surface of everyday professionalism. Yet she never crossed the line. Her touches were accidental or professional. An encouraging hand on the shoulder, a brief pat on the back. But each one carried a softness that felt like a secret invitation. At first, I told myself it was just admiration, respect for someone who'd worked her way up, who moved with purpose and strength. But slowly, the line blurred. I found myself watching her more, noticing the way her smile softened when she thought no one was looking, or how her eyes held a shadow of something unspoken when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The office was our stage, and we both knew the roles we had to play. But behind the steady professionalism, a quiet spark was growing. One that neither of us was quite ready to name, but that was impossible to ignore. In a place where deadlines ruled the day and meetings were a constant hum, the small moments we shared felt like brief islands of calm. Private, unspoken, and electric. The office was busy, but when she was near, everything seemed to slow, even if only for a second. It wasn't a grand gesture or a stolen glance across a crowded room. Instead, it was the way she lingered just a little longer at the coffee machine than necessary, her eyes briefly catching mine with a flicker of something unreadable. I caught myself holding my breath, my hand hovering over the warm ceramic mug, as if the heat could steady the sudden flutter in my chest. Her laugh was soft and rare, a gentle sound that seemed almost too light for the tension that hummed beneath the office's fluorescent lights. One afternoon, we found ourselves waiting side by the elevator. The world outside temporarily paused. Her presence was a quiet force beside me. When she turned, her eyes met mine and held a brief, steady look that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. There was no need for words. The silence was thick with meaning. Sometimes she brushed past me in the hallway, a whisper of perfume and warmth against my skin, so close that I could feel the soft fabric of her blouse against my arm. The brief contact left an echo, like a soft pulse radiating from where her fingertips had grazed. I would catch her watching me, just for a moment, before her gaze slid away like a secret she wasn't ready to share. During meetings, she had this way of speaking that made her voice almost hypnotic. Calm, assured, but with an undercurrent of something more personal. She'd offer a slight nod or a small smile when I made a good point, and those subtle affirmations felt like the world tilting just enough to let me glimpse something rare, a kind of encouragement that went beyond professional respect. Our shared moments extended to coffee breaks, those rare pauses where the office noise dulled and everything felt softer. I remember once, sitting quietly at the corner table, watching her sip her espresso, the steam curling in the light. Our conversation was minimal, more about the day's work than anything else, but the way she listened, eyes focused, eyebrows faintly raised, made me feel like I was the only person in the room. When she handed me a file or a document, her fingers brushed mine lightly, just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. It wasn't accidental. I could feel the warmth where our skin met, and even though it was a simple gesture, it sparked a quiet tension I couldn't shake. She seemed to understand how to hold space between us, between words, letting the unspoken build. There was a delicate balance, a dance where closeness and distance coexisted. Her confidence was steady, but there was a subtle vulnerability that peeked through when she thought no one was watching. In those mundane moments, between the buzz of keyboards and the clatter of phones, something deeper took root. It wasn't about what was said. It was the silences that stretched just long enough to let feelings seep in. A glance, a touch, a shared smile became tiny threads weaving us closer in ways neither of us dared to voice. The slow burn had begun, wrapped in the everyday, glowing softly beneath the surface of the office's busy rhythm. And I found myself waiting for the moment when the quiet connection might finally break through. It was well past midnight, the office emptied except for the soft hum of computers and the low flicker of desk lamps. The usual bustle had dissolved into silence, broken only by the tapping of my fingers on the keyboard and the occasional rustle of papers. She was there, too, my boss, calm and composed as ever, but with an energy that seemed almost electric in the quiet. We had been working side by side for hours, the project deadline looming close and the pressure mounting. I was tired, my mind fraying at the edges, but she remained steady, focused, unwavering. It was in moments like this that the walls we built during the day seemed to crumble just a little. The sharp professionalism softened into something more intimate, though neither of us dared say it aloud. Then, she turned to me with that familiar, unreadable expression, that smirk, half teasing, half daring. Her eyes sparkled with a challenge that was impossible to ignore. "Call me whatever you like," she said, voice low but clear in the quiet room. "Just don't stop when I ask for more." Her words hit me like a sudden rush of heat, the kind that spreads quietly but insistently through your chest. It wasn't a command, not exactly, more like a promise, wrapped in teasing authority. I felt the steady beat of my own heart, loud enough in my ears to drown out the distant city sounds outside the windows. The space between us felt smaller now, charged with a tension that thrummed beneath our casual conversation. I noticed the way her fingers tapped lightly on the edge of the desk, the subtle flex of her wrist as she leaned in just a little, as if closing the gap between us was only a matter of inches. Her presence was magnetic, and I found myself caught in it, pulled in by the slow dance of words and glances. I was acutely aware of the smooth lines of her jaw, the gentle rise and fall of her breath, the soft rustle of her blouse against the chair's leather. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but full of unspoken possibilities. I wanted to reach out, to close the distance, but uncertainty held me back. Instead, I met her gaze steadily, feeling the weight of that smirk and the subtle invitation it carried. There was no rush, no pressure, only the electric current running beneath the surface of a relationship that was shifting, deepening, becoming something neither of us could define yet. She glanced away for a moment, the smirk softening into a smile that felt more genuine, warmer. Then she said quietly, "Don't be afraid to give me more." Her words lingered, wrapping around me like a quiet dare. The challenge wasn't just about work or deadlines. It was about the unspoken connection growing between us, about pushing boundaries in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. In that late-night glow, with the city asleep outside and the office reduced to shadows and soft light, I realized the game had changed. The tension wasn't just professional anymore. It was something more fragile, more charged. A slow-burning spark waiting to be ignited. The days after that night stretched out in a blur of restless thoughts and quiet hesitation. Her words echoed in my mind. "Call me whatever you like. Just don't stop when I ask for more." They weren't just lines anymore. They felt like a challenge, a promise, and a question all at once. But beneath the intrigue, there was a knot of doubt tightening in my chest. I kept replaying the moments we shared, the smirk, the subtle brush of her hand, the way her eyes held mine longer than they should. Yet with every memory came the reality check. She was my boss, older, with a life experience I was only beginning to understand. The unspoken age gap felt heavier now, layered with the weight of workplace boundaries and social expectations. Somewhere between admiration and desire, I found myself caught in a storm of conflicting emotions. I admired her strength and grace, but was I ready to cross the line from professional respect to something more? Was this just a fleeting spark, or something deeper? And if it was real, how could I navigate it without losing myself or her? I remembered how her touch had felt that evening, brief, yet charged with meaning. The warmth of her fingertips where they brushed my arm was still vivid in my mind. But that warmth was tangled with uncertainty. Was I reading too much into those moments? Or was she sending a silent invitation I was too afraid to accept? Walking through the city streets after work, I often found my thoughts drifting back to her. The cool night air did little to clear the heat that spread through me whenever I recalled her voice, low and steady, the way it had commanded and comforted all at once. I wrestled with the fear of what others might think. Colleagues, friends, even myself. Could I risk something so uncertain? At home, I caught myself staring at my phone, fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure if I should send a message or simply wait. The hesitation was a reflection of the deeper hesitation inside me. A quiet battle between what I wanted and what I feared. Sometimes I questioned my own worthiness. Was I enough for someone like her? She was confident, experienced, and poised in ways I was still discovering. Could she see beyond the awkwardness, the nervous stammer when I was around her? Or was I just an employee she tolerated with amusement? Despite the doubts, there was a persistent pull I couldn't ignore. The moments we shared had stirred something genuine, a connection that felt fragile but real. It wasn't just physical attraction. It was the sense that beneath her composed exterior, she carried a vulnerability I recognized in myself. Late at night, I'd lie awake, imagining what it would be like to cross that invisible line, to let go of fear and embrace whatever might be waiting on the other side. But then morning would come, and the safe distance of professionalism would settle back in, quieting the restless ache inside. This internal tug-of-war shaped every interaction we had afterward. I was more aware of her presence, more sensitive to the subtleties of her touch and glance. And yet, I held back, afraid to tip the delicate balance we'd found. The slow burn continued, fueled by desire and doubt. A quiet tension that neither of us dared name, but that neither could deny. The evening had settled into a quiet calm, the office nearly empty now except for the two of us. The usual buzz of activity was gone, replaced by the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant flicker of city lights through the windows. It was one of those rare moments when the professional walls between us seemed to soften, and something more genuine began to slip through. She was sitting across from me, her posture relaxed but still carrying that inherent poise that made her impossible to ignore. I noticed how the soft light caught the subtle lines around her eyes. Not signs of weariness, but of a life fully lived, filled with stories untold. For a moment, the confident boss vanished, leaving behind someone quietly vulnerable, someone who felt like she was carefully choosing her words before speaking. "I don't often stay this late," she said, voice low and unguarded. "Sometimes, it's not the work that keeps me here." Her eyes met mine, steady and sincere, and I realized this wasn't about deadlines or projects. This was something deeper, a rare glimpse into the person behind the authority. I nodded, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves mixed with something warmer, a growing connection that had been building beneath the surface for weeks. "I get that," I said softly. "Sometimes, it's hard to turn off everything else." She smiled then, not the teasing smirk I was used to, but a gentle curve of her lips that felt like an invitation. "It's exhausting carrying all of it, the expectations, the responsibility, the loneliness that sometimes comes with it." Her words struck a chord. I could see it in her eyes, The quiet weight she carried, the vulnerability she didn't often show. It made her seem more human, less distant. I never would have guessed, I admitted, feeling the honesty in my voice. She reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The movement was casual, but the way her fingers lingered near her neck, so close yet still just out of reach, made the moment feel intimate. Then, almost without thinking, she rested her hand briefly on the table, her fingers grazing mine. The touch was light, reassuring, and I felt a calm steadiness spread through me. I don't usually let people see this side of me, she confessed, voice barely above a whisper. But with you it feels different, easier, somehow. Her admission was a fragile gift, and I felt honored to receive it. The space between us shifted, no longer charged with teasing tension, but softened by trust. I wanted to say something, to promise that I understood, that I'd be here. Instead, I simply met her gaze and let the silence speak for both of us. For the first time, the distance between boss and employee blurred. We were two people, quietly sharing a moment of understanding, a connection born from more than just words or fleeting touches. It was a subtle, tender acknowledgement of the emotional walls we both carried, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could let each other in. The night stretched on, warm and still, as if the world outside had paused to give us this moment. And in that quiet space, I realized that this was what I had been waiting for. Not a grand declaration, but a simple, honest connection that promised something real beneath the surface. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet tension between us began to evolve. What had once been tentative glances and fleeting touches grew into a gentle rhythm of closeness and understanding. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, no grand gestures or explosive moments, but a slow, deliberate climb, like watching a sunrise inch its way over the horizon. She remained the same confident, poised boss during the workday, commanding meetings with that effortless grace. But beneath her polished exterior, I saw glimpses of something softer, more tender. It was in the way she sometimes paused just a little longer when handing me a document, the way her eyes softened during our conversations, or how she smiled when I caught her in moments of quiet amusement. Our interactions deepened without words, built on shared experiences and small gestures that spoke volumes. There were moments when she would sit beside me after a long day, the chair pulled close enough that our shoulders almost touched. I could feel the subtle warmth radiating from her, a comforting presence that seemed to steady the restless parts of me. One afternoon, as we worked through a particularly challenging project, she reached out and placed her hand lightly on my shoulder. A simple touch, but full of meaning. Her fingers pressed gently, steady and sure, grounding me in a way that no words could. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let the warmth seep into me, a quiet reassurance that we were in this together. Our late-night conversations became a private world of their own. Between the glow of computer screens and the hush of empty offices, we shared thoughts and stories that we never spoke aloud during the busy hours. She told me about her past, the risks she had taken, the sacrifices made to get where she was. I shared my hopes and doubts, the fears I kept hidden beneath a veneer of calm. Trust grew between us, fragile but real, wrapped in the delicate folds of everyday life. It wasn't about rushing towards something, but savoring the moments of closeness. The shared smiles, the accidental brushes of hands, the way she would glance my way when she thought I wasn't looking. There was a quiet affection in those little things. The softness in her eyes when I asked about her day. The way she would lean in just slightly when offering guidance, her breath warm against my ear. The gentle way she tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear during a late meeting, her fingers lingering as if reluctant to let go. And I noticed how my own nerves began to settle. The nervous stammer in my voice was replaced by quiet confidence. Not just because of the professional growth, but because of the emotional connection that was slowly building. It was a mutual respect, a recognition that we were both navigating something new, something delicate, with care. Our relationship wasn't defined by loud declarations or dramatic turns. Instead, it was a slow, steady climb. Two people learning how to be close without losing themselves, how to trust without fear. The office remained our stage, But behind the scenes, something beautiful was unfolding. A bond built on respect, affection, and the gentle promise of more to come. The rhythm we had found felt steady now, like the soft pulse of a familiar song playing just beneath the surface of everyday life. What had started as subtle glances and quiet touches had blossomed into something real, something honest and deeply human. There was no rush, no desperate grasping for what might be. Instead, there was a shared understanding, a mutual respect that made every moment between us feel sacred. One late afternoon, the office was bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. The city outside melted into gold and amber, painting everything in a soft, inviting light. We were alone again, the quiet hum of the air conditioning blending with the fading daylight. She sat beside me, closer than usual, her presence comforting and steady. Our shoulders brushed, that familiar contact sending a gentle warmth through me. She glanced at me with a small, knowing smile, the kind of smile that held years of stories, laughter, and unspoken truths. Without words, she reached out and took my hand. Her fingers threaded gently through mine, the touch light but purposeful. It was a gesture full of promise, but not the kind that demanded or rushed. It was an invitation to walk forward together, at our own pace. The warmth of her skin against mine was grounding, a quiet reassurance that whatever came next, we were no longer alone. In that simple contact, I felt the culmination of weeks of slow-burning moments, the tension, the hesitation, the quiet hope, and realized how deeply connected I had become to her. Her eyes held mine, and in that gaze, there was no pretense or fear, only an honest openness that made my heart swell. I squeezed her hand softly, feeling the gentle squeeze return, a silent affirmation of trust and care. We leaned back slightly, sharing the silence filled with the fading light. The cityscape blurred outside the window, but here, in this small space between us, time seemed to pause. The professional barriers, the unspoken doubts, they all melted away, leaving just two people who had chosen to embrace something real and meaningful. She brushed a stray lock of hair behind my ear, her fingertips lingering on my cheek with a tenderness that took my breath away. The touch was delicate, like a promise whispered in a language only we understood. I closed my eyes briefly, savoring the sensation. The warmth, the softness, the quiet steadiness that had become a lifeline in a world that often felt overwhelming. "It doesn't have to be complicated," she murmured, her voice low and steady. "Just this, us." Her words settled in me like a gentle balm, soothing away all the fears and doubts that had lingered for so long. It wasn't about grand declarations or sweeping changes. It was about accepting the imperfect, beautiful reality of what we had built. I nodded, my heart full. This is enough. More than enough. The sun slipped below the horizon, and the office lights flickered on softly. But the warmth between us didn't fade. Instead, it grew, steady, sure, and patient. We sat there for a long time, hands intertwined, letting the quiet intimacy speak for itself. The slow burn had reached its glow, and in that moment, I knew we were exactly where we were meant to be. If the story stirred something in you, if you've ever felt that quiet pull towards someone you weren't supposed to want, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps this story reach more people who believe in slow-burning, real connection. And if you want more age gap romance, forbidden attraction, or quiet emotional intimacy, subscribe, turn on notifications, and let yourself fall into the next one with me. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the softest sparks burn the longest.